The First World War immobilized the Western Front in a brutal embrace of trenches, barbed wire, and artillery. By 1915, a grim stalemate had set in. Armies hurled wave after wave of infantry at one another, only to be swallowed by machine gun fire and mired in shell-churned mud. In this desolation, amid the carnage of Verdun and the Somme, a critical question emerged. How could one see beyond the immediate hellscape, find a seam in the enemy's armor, and open a path through which decisive action could flow? The answer, in the German ranks, was found in an evolution of eyes and edges. Reconnaissance joined with assault, and the result was the birth of the stormtrooper. Though often remembered for their shock tactics, the German Sturmtruppen were reconnaissance troops first and foremost. Their origin lies in the failures of traditional warfare, where commanders realized too late that massed formations could not overcome deeply entrenched defenders. Instead, the battlefield called for a new type of soldier, one who could crawl silently through no man's land, observe enemy routines with precision, memorize the landscape by moonlight, and strike with scalpel-like violence. Stormtroopers were scouts with teeth, and each raid or assault began long before the first shot was fired. Their formation was not purely theoretical. Captain Willie Rohr, commanding what became the famed Assault Detachment Rohr, gave the idea form and discipline. Under Rohr's leadership, these elite soldiers trained not just in weapons and assault, but in the finer arts of battlefield awareness, terrain study, silent movement, and intelligent observation. Rohr understood that no assault could succeed without understanding the terrain and the enemy. Each raid was preceded by meticulous preparation. Night after night, stormtroopers slipped through the wire, sketching trench systems, timing enemy sentries, and noting the locations of machine gun nests. They moved like ghosts, avoiding detection, sometimes lying motionless for hours to gather the critical piece of information that would determine the path of attack. This patience became a kind of doctrine unto itself. Observe more than you strike, and when you do strike, do so with precision born from clarity. These reconnaissance missions shaped the entire operational outlook of stormtrooper units. They did not rely on maps alone. They created them, hand-drawn, often blood-stained, marked with notes in pencil or grease, reflections of first-hand observation. Instructors taught recruits to read the ground like a book, the flattening of grass that betrayed a patrol path, the glint of metal indicating a buried wire, the faint sound of tools at work in an enemy sap. These were not vague indicators, but actionable data in a war that too often moved blindly. Where conventional units reacted to incomplete intelligence, stormtroopers led with knowledge, often becoming the first soldiers to cross into enemy lines before an offensive and the last to return before 0 hour. Many times, the fate of an entire assault hinged on the detailed sketches and whispered reports delivered by these quiet predators of no man's land. Their gear was stripped down for mobility. Heavy rifles were replaced with carbines and pistols. Trench knives and grenades replaced bayonets. Every ounce of weight not necessary for reconnaissance or infiltration was discarded. They wore darker uniforms and smeared soot on their faces to vanish into the night. Communication, too, was adapted to their purpose. Signal flares and runners were prearranged to avoid radio chatter and reduce detection risk. Flamethrower teams and engineers often followed their lead, relying on the stormtroopers' precise recon to target enemy bunkers and wired obstacles. These trailing units depended not just on brute force, but on the accuracy of the path carved by the scouts. One of the hallmarks of stormtrooper reconnaissance was its dynamism. Patrols were not just passive observers. They adapted in real time. Stormtroopers often made decisions to abort or redirect their paths based on subtle shifts in wind, light, or enemy behavior. Their situational awareness was trained to a razor's edge. They were briefed with high expectations and sent with little more than a compass, wire cutters, a few grenades, and a mental map crafted from cumulative observation. In some sectors, these recon missions became so routine and effective that entire stormtrooper detachments functioned as an independent intelligence service embedded at the tactical edge of the front. Nowhere was this fusion of reconnaissance and assault more evident than in the 1917 Battle of Riga. There, stormtrooper units crossed the Dvina River under cover of fog and silence, having already spent days mapping out enemy weak points. They emerged from the mist not as a wall of men, but as surgical instruments, striking deep and fast through the sectors they had painstakingly reconnoitered. The Russian lines fractured under the weight of attacks, guided by knowledge rather than guesswork. Their success was not due to sheer violence, but due to an elegant choreography built on weeks of scouting and an intimate familiarity with enemy routines, trench bends, and even the personality quirks of opposing units. A year later, during the spring offensive of 1918, Stormtrooper recon shaped the campaign's very architecture. German High Command pored over recon reports provided by these units, notes from forward observers, sketches from patrols, and oral debriefings from scouts who had crawled within yards of British trenches. When the offensive began, stormtroopers moved in waves behind creeping barrages, avoiding strong points and threading through blind spots in the Allied defense. Blind spots only visible to those who had spent weeks studying them from the shadows. There are accounts of stormtrooper sergeants leading companies not with maps, but with hand signals and memorized footpaths known only to those who had walked them in silence under the stars. The stormtroopers' unique capability to reconnoiter and then assault did not go unnoticed by their enemies. British and French units reported an increasing number of night patrols and trench raids aimed not at killing, but at observation. Officers described unsettling moments where enemy scouts would disappear back into the darkness, having measured the ground and left without a fight. These were no longer mere raids. They were acts of strategic reconnaissance wrapped in violent dress. Entire trench systems were redesigned in response, yet the stormtroopers adapted again, slipping through fresh layouts with the same patient diligence. The American Expeditionary Forces, green but observant, quickly adopted similar doctrines. Their experiences in late war battles were shaped by the stormtrooper model: patrol first, strike second. Many of the small unit tactics that American troops employed in the Meuse-Argonne were lifted directly from German recon-led infiltration models. The exchange of tactical DNA was swift and permanent. From 1918 onward, reconnaissance was no longer a supporting act. It was the overture and the tempo setter for every significant engagement. The legacy of the stormtrooper recon ethos reached far beyond the Western Front. In the Second World War, German Brandenburg units and Allied commandos embraced the same ethos: get close, observe thoroughly, strike with intimate precision. In Vietnam, long-range reconnaissance patrols borrowed directly from the stormtrooper playbook, substituting rice paddies for trench mazes, but retaining the same reverence for information gathered by eye and ear. To understand stormtroopers is to understand the emergence of modern reconnaissance warfare, where the line between observer and fighter, scout and slayer, was forever blurred in the mud and blood of the Great War. They moved unseen, but not unplanned. They were the shadow before the storm, and often the storm itself. Their legacy endures in every soldier who crouches in the dark with a map in his mind, a target in his vision, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment to move.